I just finished a book for Penguin called Hacking Your Education, which is all about how to educate yourself. And my main qualification for writing this book is that I'm an elementary school dropout. When I was in 5th grade, I came to my parents and told them that I didn't want to go to school. Like many 5th graders, I wasn't really enjoying my time in the classroom. And although my parents were fairly traditional, my mom was a public school teacher and my dad an engineer, both products of the system, they believed in me enough and had the confidence in me to say, hey, make your own decisions. If you want to leave school, go ahead. The worst thing could possibly happen is that you might go back and, hey, school's always going to be there. And while my parents spent many sleepless nights wondering about whether or not I would succeed outside of school, it worked out okay. And as Nero said, I became an unschooler, which is a self-directed form of homeschooling. I wasn't following any prescribed curriculum. My parents weren't teaching me. Instead, I created an education from the world around me. I found mentors, I built businesses, I did internships, I volunteered in my community, and I was able to do things that I never would have been able to do inside the classroom. Unschooling was determined by a guy named John Holt, who'd been an educator in New York City for 20-some years in the 1960s. And for years, he'd been asking the question that most people ask when they go about improving something, which is, how do you improve school? How do you make this better? And he'd come up with all the usual responses, and eventually figured out that he was asking the wrong question. That the right question to ask was, what are the outcomes that we actually want to see from school? Do we want school to deliver content? Do we want school to be a community? Is school about the teachers? Is school about finding mentors? Is school about getting a job? Is it about economic productivity? But it's important to note that this was in 1960. Another adventure into education reform was a book called Summerhill, about a school in the UK started by a guy named A.S. Neal. This school is a democratic free school that's based in the UK. It started in the 1920s, and there's no curriculum. It's completely flat. And the book that he wrote, by the same name, Summerhill, sold 3 million copies between 1960 and 1973, which is an astronomical number. And it's amazing to think that even almost 50 years ago, that people were thinking about these schools, thinking about how to become self-directed. The real question is, though, not should we go to school or should we not go to school, but rather about whether or not we trust people's innate capacity to be curious. Do we trust people and think that if left to their own devices, they'll ask questions, they'll poke, they'll prod? Or do we think that they need to be tested and guided and molded and shaped like bags of flour? As an unschooler, I was able to do awesome things. I worked on political campaigns, I organized collaborative learning groups, I helped build a library in my hometown, I spent half a year living in France, I went to conferences that I crashed, I worked at startups in Silicon Valley. But even after 6 years outside of the school, I still went to college. That was because my parents had gone and my peers were going, and that's what society expects you to do if you want to be a competent, educated human being. And it's funny, I justified my choice to leave school by saying, oh, my friend Sarah was unschooled and she still got into Harvard, but so it must be okay. It's odd to be in a position where you're trying to define yourself by expectations outside of the system, but yet by the expectations and measures of the system, you exceeded. And what I found at Hendrix is that my frustrations that I had in my 5th grade classroom were still present 6 years later. Students were there not because they knew what they wanted to do with their lives, but because they didn't know what else to do with their lives. It seemed a very expensive way to spend time if you didn't know what you wanted to do. Since 1980, the cost of college in the United States has risen 350% more than the cost of housing, medical care, transportation, or housing, more than the consumer price index. And the trend is following around the world. The UK just tripled tuition fees, and other countries are soon to follow. The average student now graduates with $27,000 in debt, which is just an astronomical amount. An amount that gets you saddled and stuck into a narrow path when you graduate college. There's now more student loan debt than credit card debt in the States. It's really scary, because we're facing a bubble that will be as bad, if not worse, than the housing bubble. At least with mortgages, there's something to repossess. There's a physical asset, there's a house. But you can't repossess someone's education. Sure, you can take back that piece of paper, but it's not worth anything to anyone else. But the challenge is not just that the cost is rising, but at the same time, the value of an education is decreasing. The New York Times called the most recent crop of college graduates, those under 25, Generation Limbo, because 22.5% are unemployed, and another 22% are working jobs that don't require their degree. Academically Adrift, a study done at NYU, found that 36% of students over 4 years of college showed no improvement in things like critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing as measured on the Collegiate Learning Assessment. My argument today is not that schools should go away or be banned completely, but rather that there shouldn't be one path. And right now, there is only one path through school. If you don't go to school, there are negative societal stigmas, it's hard to get a job, it's hard to get visas, it's hard to convince people that you are a worthy human being. This was most illustrated to me about a week before I left school, and I was having dinner with a friend in the cafeteria, and he said to me, how are you going to support yourself when you leave school? What are you going to do? How are you going to learn? So I moved back to San Francisco and started writing about my frustrations with college at uncollege.org, and realized that the same self-directed methodology with which I had learned as a child could be applied to higher education. There was no reason that I couldn't direct my own education as I'd done from 6th to 12th grade. In the year and a half since I started on college, it's grown from a small resource into a tremendous resource, and we now organize things like hackademic camps that get people together in the real world to help them learn skills, like finding mentors and creating personal learning plans to learn outside of school. And next year we're launching a gap year program to take an entire cohort of people through the year-long process of not going to college. But these two things that we're doing are just one small bit of the fact that education is becoming decentralized. It used to be that you went to an institution and you got all of education there. You found teachers, you found mentors, you found content. And now that's all being pulled apart, piece by piece, brick by brick. And this is starting with the knowledge, one of the reasons that John Holt set out to go to school. But this is the easy part. MIT started putting their courses online 10 years ago. We've got the Khan Academy, there's all these open educational resources, and that's really easy. And it's great, it's totally awesome. But content, knowledge by itself, is not education. Education comes when you get people together in a room, questioning, supporting each other's ideas, poking and prodding. And it's communities that I see being formed in hacker spaces, in co-working spaces, in incubators, and communities that are organized by things like Skillshare and on the internet with OpenStudy and Quora that are beginning to get to the point where people can really learn and come together and support each other outside of the classroom. The third and probably most important aspect of a college degree today is the signaling effect. The fact that a college degree serves as a proxy for individuals to show how competent you are. But today in Silicon Valley, if you want to get a job at a technology company, you don't send them your resume or your transcript. You create a portfolio on a site like Behance or Stack Overflow and GitHub. You contribute to that community. You show off your actual competencies, what you can do. And people judge that, not a piece of paper from an institution. In the future, it's not difficult to imagine a young woman who wants to become a developer who, instead of going to college, chooses to take courses online from MIT OpenCourseWare, form a community through an institution like TechShop, and gain a signal through contributing to the community on GitHub. What's really important to note is that these are not changes that will happen in 5 or 10 years. These are changes that are happening right now. And it's amazing to see that all of these institutions are changing right before our very eyes. Right now, curating your education costs a fraction of the price of going to school and is orders of magnitude more meaningful. Thank you.